Today's lesson I'll give you a lot of inspirational checkmates and one game that will give you a lot of inspiration on how to play at state. So in this position, what should white play next? Yeah, this is kind of the most obvious. Checkmate in 1, queen g7, the bishop defends the queen. Now, does anybody know the name for this type of setup? I think I heard someone say it. Yeah, weak color complex. So what we see in this position is that the dark squares are very, very weak. Black is not covering any of these dark squares. And so we have a weak color complex on the dark squares. So in today's lesson, we're going to go through what to do if your opponent has a weak color complex. We'll see a little bit on how to create a weak color complex, and then we'll also look at an entire game that deals with a weak color complex. But first, let's start off with some just fun little checkmating positions. So it's white to move. What do you think white should play?
Queen to g7.
Yep. Also queen g7. So bishop defends the queen. Queen gives the check and there's no escape. So what color is the weak color complex on? A light or dark squares? Yeah, dark squares. Here we see the dark squares are rather weak. So there are two different criteria you want to watch out for when you're trying to determine whether there's a weak color complex in the position. The first has to do with pawn structure. Does anybody notice anything unique about black's pawns?
They're all on white squares.
Yeah, they're all on light squares. And since pawns only capture to the left or to the right, notice that they're only attacking light squares. That means that the dark squares are not protected by the pawns. So that's the first factor you want to look for, pawn structure. All of black's pawns are on light squares, so there's a pretty good chance there'll be a weak color complex on the dark squares. The second factor you want to look for has to do with the bishops. So in this position, black has a light squared bishop, but doesn't have a dark squared bishop. If black had a dark squared bishop, say in the corner of the board here on h8, notice how it's able to cover up some of these weak squares. But without a bishop, there's checkmate.
Sorry. I think he died, actually. No.
Since he's going to lose his queen, he's probably going to lose a rook, might get checkmated, and so he simply resigned. So this is a really fun game I played a couple of years ago, dealing with the weak color complex. I sacrificed my rook for my opponent's bishop, had this big weak color complex to work with, and got this bishop, and then his king just ran for his life, but on the run he didn't end up being all that safe. So the weak color complex is a really important and fun idea in attacking chess, involving lots of different checkmates with bishops and with queens, and it's something very good to know. So let's go ahead and now finish up with a tactic, and a tactic that will have to do with weak color complexes. So let me see, I've got a big database here full of tactics. Let me try to find one that I'm looking for. Here we go. This one's quite nice. So it's white to move and checkmate in 3 moves. So first, let me point out to you the potential for a weak color complex. Notice that all of black's pawns are on light squares, but black does have that dark squared bishop. So at the moment, there's not too much of a weak color complex, but if the bishop were to disappear, then there would be. Does anybody have any ideas on the first move? Give you a hint. Every single move is going to be a check. Got to be really bold on the first move. Got to get the bishop involved. The second move is a double check.
Knight F3.
So knight F3 is a good idea, but unfortunately, black will have a back rank checkmate there.
Sacrifice the queen?
Ah, so were we going to sacrifice it for the pawn or for the bishop?
The bishop.
Absolutely. Get rid of the bishop. The king has to take. What's the second move?
Check. Take threats in the queen. Check with the knight.
To this square or this?
Right there.
F5?
No, take, yeah. Take the pawn, take the pawn.
No, check him. So
The bishop's checking the pawn too.
Okay, so this will be okay. King moves away, but there's no checkmate here. We get the queen, but then black gets the knight. And as far as material goes, white's only up a pawn. So not a huge advantage. The other move with the knight's the correct one. Knight F5. And notice this is a double check, which is very important. Otherwise, be that problem going off. There wasn't a check, or if just say the knight was checking, queen could take the knight. But because it's a double check, the only move the king has is to go to G8. And then what's the final move?
Knight H6.
Knight H6 is checkmate. Or if you wanted to play it a little bit differently, you could also play Knight E7. Either way, it's checkmate. And we see the importance of the weak color complex. Pawns are on light squares, knight's sitting here on a dark square, and then the bishop covering the rest of the dark squares. So this is a very fun checkmating pattern with the weak color complex. So does anybody have any questions over the weak color complex or questions in general? Nope. All right, well.